Right, hello friends, it's Ian Vout here from Perfect Performance Coaching. I hope you're all well today. Well, today we're going to be talking to Ross Potter about our COVID-19 situation we're dealing with here. Now, I know you're all sick probably of hearing about COVID-19, but I promise you this conversation is going to be different because we're not going to be focusing on how to put out the fire that is COVID. We're going to be focusing on how can we utilize our biggest asset, which is our health. So we are really lucky to have the NHS catch us at times like this, and of course they're doing an outstanding job. All power to them. But the problem really lies, I think, with the fact that some people are getting COVID and they're not getting any symptoms, and other people are getting symptoms that actually kill them. So it's not a matter of the virus liking us or disliking us. It's actually a matter of how our immune systems are working and how they can actually tackle this new virus. So we're going to talk about that today with Ross and make sure that we can get in there. So just say hi to Ross as he's here. How you doing, Ross?
How you doing? I'm here. I'm waiting. I'm ready. I'm primed.
Excellent. Right. So welcome, Ross. Just quick lowdown on Ross. He's a physique and online coach with over 10 years experience in the industry, and he's competed at various bodybuilding competitions, winning his first place at the British finals. He's been featured on BBC Three and in Men's Health, and he has goals in which to not only help his clients physically, but also mentally. He owns his own studio down in North Hampshire, which is his base of operations for RP coaching. He's managed to change almost or over 100 people worth of transformations in his life. So that's always good to hear. So Ross, welcome to the show, and let's do this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It'll be good to kind of give the listeners a little bit more in-depth information. So I'm ready when you are, bud.
Cool, right. So now you've been introduced and everything. So what I want to talk about today is just sort of how you're potentially approaching the crisis with your clients, because obviously you're more of a bodybuilder coach, if that's correct in saying. I hope so.
Yeah. I come from that background. I mean, I always started off as a personal trainer.
Yeah.
And I, over the years, have, as yourself, have developed the kind of more to the coaching side, if you like. So now I class myself as a physique coach, offering a lot more to my clients rather than just a leg session for 40 quid.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think all of us developing initially were there for the physique side of things and trying to help people burn body fat or whatnot, but then realize that actually there's more to it than just a few weights and going to exercise 2 or 3 times a week. So it's good to have you here again. So kind of, do you have any experience with COVID at the moment? Have you had any personal, like your friends or your family at the moment? Have they been infected? How have they worked out?
I mean, to be completely honest, I've been blessed because everyone in my close circle, my friends, my family, everyone is still in good health. So I'm very, very fortunate in that respect to have everyone in good health around me. I think there's been 1 or 2 of my clients who are frontline workers on the NHS, and they've had the virus. They had it very mildly. I was talking to one of my girls who is a dermatologist on the front line, and she's had it. Her mum's had it, and she said actually most people in the NHS in the hospital that she actually works in have had a mild strain of the coronavirus. So again, I think that opens up a bit of a debate for especially for you to dive into. Why are some people getting a mild strain and some people are dying? So again, there's the 2 ends of the spectrum there.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. It's kind of it's strange, and obviously knowing people who are in the NHS. My mother was a nurse. I've got friends who are sort of midwives and doctors and whatnot. So they're all in there and they're kind of battling this thing out. But you're obviously getting people who are looking like they're, generally healthy and they're, of a normal, well, not normal age, but sort of a mid-age, sort of anywhere from sort of 30 to 50. And yet they seem to be dying of this thing. And you're just like, doesn't make much sense when everybody's been talking about the government and everybody is more about 70 plus people with comorbidities or people who have already ill, and it's kind of sort of another thing added to the list means that it just tips them over the edge. So
yeah, I think there's a lot of misinformation. I mean, you see hundreds of news broadcasts every day. Different news industries are broadcasting different things, different figures, and again, maybe this podcast can clear a few things up, especially from your side, as to maybe what is actually happening. So that'll be interesting. I'm interested to get involved with that as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I kind of, for me, I obviously look back at the primal side of things, and I'm like, don't just look back at the last week and have you eaten well or have you exercised well. Let's look back at your whole lifetime. Let's take it back to maybe when you were a child, or take it back to your parents and the genes that you've inherited. Because I think as a society we've had, it's going fairly deep, but as a society we've sort of had this evolution over the last probably 3 generations. So my grandparents were fairly healthy, but they lived through the Second World War. They had rationing and all that kind of stuff. And although the food was all organic at that point, it's not necessarily going to be the most healthful. But they didn't really have an epidemic of obesity. They had more of a sort of, people were undernourished, and so it was more that they weren't able to get their hands on the right amount of foods and the right amount of nutrients to keep them in good health. Move forward to another generation, you've got our parents, who are people who sort of lived through the sort of 70s and 80s, when the government really took over what people should be eating. So, and we kicked out kicked out fat, which was supposedly causing all this problems with our hearts, but end up finding out that it's actually the opposite. So we've now got a lot more sort of seed oils in our diet, rather than sort of healthful fats and oils from natural sources. And then we've sort of gone into the more ready meal type things as well. So myself, and I don't know if you're the same, but my breakfast when I was growing up was cereal. So it was, cereals that had probably 50% sugar in them. And
yeah, I think everyone was the same. I was only talking the other day about the toys you used to get in the cereal. Do you remember at the bottom of the cereal pack?
Yeah.
You used to try and dive down and grab the little toy out of the cereal.
When you got two toys in a packet, it was like a great day.
Gone are those days, mate. Now it's fruit juice, isn't it? Now and
yeah, no, exactly. That's the thing. And like, I remember, every single morning I'd probably have 3 bowls of this stuff. I'd go to school, I'd be hungry by 9 o'clock, and school only started at 8:45, and I couldn't focus or concentrate. My stomach would be rumbling, but I had no idea it was that. And then you'd have, sandwiches, crisps, chocolate bars, maybe sort of fizzy drinks for lunch, or a juice for lunch. And then in the evening, it would be maybe a ready meal, or it'd be pasta or pizza or fish fingers or whatever. And so the nutrients I was getting for probably the first 20 years of my life, before I started learning all this stuff, what is being quite low. And you can kind of see that if you weren't starting off from a place of strength, then it means that all of this stuff's just going to slowly reduce the quality of your health. And for me, I've spent the last now 18 years improving my health, to try and get it as good as I can, make sure I'm as sharp as possible, keep myself nice and lean and strong. But for a lot of people out there, they don't have the knowledge that I have or you have. And so we're in this place now where people are still eating like that. People are still eating cereals for breakfast. They're still eating, sandwiches for lunch. They're still having, lots of alcohol and sweet things and chocolate bars to see them through the day. And we've come to a point where suddenly we're being attacked by something, and it's having a worse effect than you'd maybe like.
Yeah, of course. I think also a big thing there is the times have changed, and I think people now, what with veganism coming through and all these different sorts of diets, people actually want to understand and people want to educate themselves. Whereas I think you look back 20, 30, 40 years, there was more of an emphasis on earning, trying to provide for the family.
Very true, yeah.
So I think as times have gone on, we're now in an age where science is developed and we're in a much better position to be able to look into these things. I mean, I'm sure 50 years ago, your job role probably didn't exist unless you were in a specialist medical field. So
no, we're definitely privileged now. I speak to my parents, and they sort of put themselves in my position when they were sort of my age, and their houses and the way they're going to pay off their mortgage, or the way they were going to put food on the table, was number one priority. It wasn't like, what am I eating, and should it be gluten-free, or should it be vegan, or should it be, maybe I should be eating.
Should you be buying corn sausages?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of, none of that really existed, which is why when I sort of raise an eyebrow when something comes in and dominates the food chain. So when soy came in, I think it was something that I was very like, I didn't even hear about this the first like 20 years of my life, and all of a sudden we've got soy milk and soy sausages and soy this and soy that, and it was like, just doesn't make sense. So you look into it and you realize that it's not necessarily healthful, but it's very good for profits for the companies. So
sure, yeah, that's what most of it is now, isn't it? So
there's a lot of it, I'd say, not 100%, but it's good to have choice, but sometimes the choice is just not worth it. So so yeah, but as you say, we are in a good position, I think, overall, but because there's so much choice, there's so much confusion along with it. So hopefully we can sort of start to clear things up a little bit and get people to understand what a real healthy diet is, what they should be doing to support their immune health, and we can all go from there. So first off, so we've got the old people and ill people as sort of number one at the moment on priority list. Have you heard any other sort of risk groups that you've looked at?
If I'm being completely honest, I haven't gone too far into different types of groups. I mean, we were all told when the coronavirus hit that obviously the most vulnerable were the aging or those with underlying health issues that perhaps they knew about or didn't know about. One big area that I think is an issue is the obesity, and how obesity can be linked to immunity from the virus. What's going to make the virus a little bit more threatening? Yeah. Certainly, if you are obese, I'm sure we'll go into that shortly. But that's one thing from the top of my head. I know obviously with obesity comes a whole range of other cofactors. So maybe let's dig into that. Yeah,
without a doubt. I mean, as you say, probably only the last maybe 3-4 days, people have been sort of bringing this up in the sort of media, or my media circles at least. It won't hit the sort of news too quickly. Although I did see it in sort of the New York Times, I think, that obesity is now sort of a risk factor, and it's probably the number 2 risk factor. So even if you're sort of over 70 with no risk or other comorbidities, then you're better off than you would be if you were obese and 30 years younger. So yeah, I mean, obesity kind of obviously just being overweight isn't necessarily on the face of it at least, isn't necessarily a risk factor. But the problem is, of course, when you are overweight, you've got a lot of other risk factors that got you there. So you've got the potential for high blood sugar, which comes along with high blood pressure and cardiovascular risk diseases. And then your immune system, of course, if you haven't been eating well to make yourself obese, then that means your immune system, which is 70% of it's located in your gut, probably means it's not going to be doing very well right now. Couple that with things like antibiotics as well. So if you've had antibiotics any more than 2 times in your life, you've completely changed the biodiversity in your gut, which means if you haven't been then replenishing it with good, healthy probiotic foods and prebiotic sort of foods to support your gut, then you're going to be in a much worse position. So it is a factor there, I think, at the moment, that it's kind of, obesity can be categorized in kind of a wide or broad reach, but it's mainly because of all these other areas, I think, which is actually more linked into traditional diseases. Obesity is sort of a lifestyle disease, almost 100%, rather than sort of being something that you just kind of pick up by chance. So as a lot of people think. So have you got any kind of like clients that are in that sort of realm, and are you telling them to basically double down and make sure they get themselves sorted?
I wouldn't say obese. I wouldn't say any of my clients are obese. And I think me being a very honest coach, if I genuinely had very, very obese clients, I would more than happily say, yes, 90% of my clients are overweight, because obviously that's why they're coming to me. One of the big factors which I've really, really picked up on since the start of this pandemic is we are ultimately burning less calories every day. So we're much less active than we have been. So take a normal commute, someone who walks to work or gets the train, someone who maybe does 10,000 steps a day, to take that lifestyle and then put that person at home sitting at a desk, we are so much less active. So all of my client plans who I tailor for, so I do very specific tailored diet plans. Let's just say they're on a diet of 2,000 calories and they're doing cardio, they're training, and they're doing 15,000 steps. If we take that person, we sit them behind a desk, we've straight away taken away their 15,000 steps. They're getting up later because of, again, poor sleep habits and the fact that they can lie in later because they're not commuting. So straight away, we've lost that morning cardio element. And chances are they're not going to the gym because, one, they can't, and two, they're not actually that bothered about doing a home routine because the motivation's not there. So you take someone who's active 5 days of the week, all of a sudden we've got someone who is now falling very, very nicely into the sedentary lifestyle bracket, and they're still going to be in 2,000 calories. So right away, they're in a surplus. So that's one of the biggest things I've done. I've had to pull those calories right down to cater for the lack of activity, so to speak.
No, I think I've got quite a lot of clients and friends even that sort of said, oh yeah, I usually drink twice a week. At the moment I'm drinking 5. So
yeah, at the moment I'm drinking 7 out of 7.
It's quite impressive really what sort of sedentary sort of lifestyle does, because normally you'd imagine, oh well, I'm not doing as much of this, so I won't do as much of that, but it's not the way it happens. It's like I'm at home, I'm chilling, I'm basically feeling like I'm on holiday, and so I'm going to drink more, I'll probably eat more, and then I'm going to feel pretty crap at the end of this. So there's kind of all talk about the COVID-15. People are getting confused that it just means the COVID 15 pounds that people are probably going to gain throughout this time. So
more than likely. And I think one of the big factors also is, if you are sat behind that desk, you do lose track of time because you are going to shut yourself in the home office. And I think, listening to a lot of my clients' feedback, they are forgetting to eat meals, they're forgetting to have water, and ultimately they're working harder because not only have they got their own work to do, they've got the other 6 people who have potentially lost their jobs. So now they've got another load of workload on top. So in some respects, the working day is much longer and a lot more stressful because you've got to then deal with your kids butting in, you've got to deal with your partner nagging you, you've got, there's so many then external factors which come in. So stress is up, and stress cortisol levels is weight gain. So it's a vicious cycle.
We need to really kind of, I think the whole mental illness thing that's coming at the moment that people keep sort of mentioning more and more now, we're getting longer and longer in lockdown, and it is a matter of that people don't really know how to react. And so if you're already sort of mentally challenged, and then you've got to sort of take on board this, I'm not now seeing people, and even myself, I feel it. It's like I'd really like to go out and see some friends and family, but it's not really possible at the moment. And you kind of think, I don't know, you're obviously talking to people on Skype and whatnot, and it's something that you can feel it, that if I had kind of any anxieties or depressive symptoms already, then that's just going to push you further and further, and you get into a bit of a hole in that sense.
I mean, I had 3 predictions when we first went into lockdown. My 3 predictions were that domestic violence would increase, mental health would increase, and obesity would increase. And so far, looking at some of the headlines, I know that domestic violence certainly is on the rise. And it's bad. It's not just the pandemic of the virus, but everything internally. By that I mean inside the house, which is then having really negative repercussions on our health and our well-being. So a really important thing you just brought up.
No, exactly. I think that leads into kind of why people are more stressed and more susceptible to this virus, because if we're more stressed, then that depletes our immune system. That means we're not going to sleep as well. I think I was posting on something the other day, which is basically if you miss out 4 hours of sleep for one night, you reduce your natural killer cells, which are the cells that kill off things like cancers and viruses by 70%. So it's a huge factor if people aren't able to sleep properly. So, and a lot of people are either going to bed late, they're sitting up watching Netflix, or messing around on their phones, and they're not getting the sleep they need, even though they probably have more opportunities than ever to do it. And that's a big factor. And that's linking into sort of the NHS staff that are dying. You think, I know the NHS staff that I know are well overworked. They're pretty underpaid as well, unfortunately, and they generally are not getting enough sleep. They're stressed out with their jobs. They take it home with them, so the stress leads in. Then they eat poorly because, of course, stress eating is a factor, and it's going to lead into more and more sort of a cycle of lower and lower immunity, and then they've got to go back and stress or put themselves in an environment where they're almost definitely going to pick something up. So,
but I think a big thing as well is obviously a lot of them have taken that decision to self-isolate away from family. So when on a normal day, when you've had the trauma in A&E or you're in ICU and you've had the amount of trauma that you take home with you, your family can help to offload that. The same as the emergency services. I've been in the force for 8 years, and there's been times when I get home and I'm like I need to just let off a little bit of steam. And if you are coming home to an empty house and a ready meal because you are of sheer tiredness, you virtually have no escape. So there are no words to describe just how amazing the NHS is at this current time.
Yeah. No, I keep saying to people, like, support the NHS by sorting yourselves out. So it's kind of this thing of like, we can stand and clap on Thursdays, and we can, donate money to certain NHS charities. But ultimately, if you guys actually take care of yourselves and improve your immune system so you don't have to go into the NHS to, go on ventilators or whatnot, then, you're supporting them in your own way. And, it has a knock-on effect that you can actually be useful in society. So if you need to support your neighbours or your grandparents or whoever it is, you're there to do that rather than being a burden. So it's important, I think, you can focus on this a bit more, which I'd love for the news to sort of pick up that message and say, hey, if people reduced weight, if they started eating cleaner, if they started doing a bit more exercise and understanding and getting to bed on time, then they'd actually stand a better chance to fight this thing. And then you'd actually find that this thing wouldn't be as bad as everybody's, worried about, and there'll be more people on the ground to help. But it is, and like I say, because of the NHS is short-staffed, you can't really say to people, oh, well, don't work 12-hour shifts, just work a 9-hour shift, because there's nobody to cover. So, and, they're absolute stars, I tell you that. But it's really tough environment.
Following on from that, we can change that negative into a positive. And if I go back to say, there was more stress and people aren't sleeping, etc., I think if you completely flip the bottle on its head, there are so many positives to take from the fact that you are at home, you are safe. Let's just look, you don't have the stress of a commute. You aren't sat under artificial light for 12 hours a day looking at screens. Yes, you're looking at screens, but 9 out of 10 people have access to a window. And in the cities, obviously, you're sat under artificial light, so you've lost that element of stress. You have the ability to cook your own meals, to go and grab some water, to walk around the block at lunchtime, to see your family. So there are 101 things which actually you are in control of. And I think people listen to this, you're either going to go one of two ways. You're either going to be that person who is let's say the pessimist, who is feeling like your family are a burden because you've got to homeschool the kids and you're missing meals and you're sleeping late and you're just in a bad routine. Or you can be the optimist, where most of my clients are now, because we've been working through the process, where you are getting to bed on time, you're waking up earlier, you're in a good routine, you're actually eating all of the meals you need to. The extra 5-6 hours a day that you have, because you're not working, you're training, you're performing homework. And so my clients are still making progress. So there's no reason why people, there's no reason why you should not be making progress in this class.
I think we're all locking ourselves in our own environment. We're in our little kind of snow globes, if you like. And so it's like, well, whatever you put in that environment, you are then going to be taking in. It's kind of miniaturized our lives. And yet,
Absolutely.
we're not, if people are choosing to go out and still buy crap because the supermarkets have everything now, all the sort of rush of buying toilet paper is over, thank God. And I think now any kind of food is out there, and we should focus on actually getting ourselves a bit healthier and taking the time to cook and cooking for our kids and spending time with them, and being with our partners and enjoying their company, and like say taking the positive out of it, because you're never going to be in this control of your environment in the future. It just doesn't really happen. It's probably never happened.
I mean, really, there's as cliche as it sounds, there's no better time to be alive, because we have access to everything that we need. I recently did a podcast about, kind of flipping it on its head and looking at the positives. You've got running water, you've got a roof over your head, you have your loved ones, like you have everything you need. So there seems to be this mass panic, and I'm like, if you actually take a step back and appreciate what you have, you can take so many things out of this quarantine, this lockdown, and come out the other side ready to virtually start again and be whoever you want, but a completely new, brand new you.
I wholly agree. I think so. It's important to kind of get people to try and think this way a little bit more. One curveball is, why are men dying more? Any theories?
Well, looking online, I've seen a lot of stupid videos. So, in relation to COVID, I'm sure you're going to tell me, but I don't know. I honestly don't know.
I don't know if there's any kind of particular secret. I don't think there's. I mean, there may well be some kind of cell issue with COVID being able to attach to the male cell easier, or it's got an easier way in. But I think if you look at it, would you say men are usually a bit more flippant with their health than women?
Huge question.
Men obviously drink or can drink more, at least, than women, because all the recommendations are much higher for men. So yeah, it's kind of.
I don't know. I think that's such a broad question, and I'm not in a position to sit here and give that advice or to try and make something up on the spot. I know there seems to be this sort of underlying male mental health issue where a lot of people are, it always has been that stigma that, guys can't talk. Maybe that whole mental thing is, the sort of going back to, I guess, older times where the male feels like the breadwinner. That's changed because time has moved on, but there seems to be more of a pressure and more of a
I mean, obviously I think like male magazines sell more than women's magazines now, apparently, but it used to be obviously the other way around. And so I don't know if it's kind of men find that eating a bit better or whatnot is a bit girly, and they can't then go to if they're going to the pub or whatever, and they're like, oh, I don't want to drink tonight because I'm trying to be healthy. Does that then alienate them from their social circles? And so they kind of, there's this kind of knock-on effect of poor health purely to kind of stay in a social circle. Because I know plenty of people definitely do that.
I mean, I'm definitely not, because I'd rather be at home with my slippers on, cup of tea, and I'm only 28, so the future is looking bright. My 30s are looking adventurous.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's only, like I say, it's only a sort of theory from me at the moment, really, because they haven't managed to touch on anything. But yeah, it's kind of a thing of like, there is a social side, I think, of on the male side, and there is some for women, but in general, I think that women take care of themselves a lot better, or have done in the past, and there's been maybe more pressure on them to do that in the past. So men, maybe it's the kind of that side of things, but we'll see, I guess, on how that will work.
Well, I think especially with women, there's the mothering instinct, isn't there? I mean, genetics. If you go back to, I mean, you look at wildlife in general, the male versus the female. The male is generally the more aggressive, dominating, holds the territory, and the females are the more mothering. So maybe there's some element of that which is involved, but yeah, to be honest, I'd be lying if I was to make up some
Yeah.
weird stats and
There's
figures.
there's one thing that was in the news actually, which is the ethnicity. So ethnic minority are getting more or have a higher prevalence of COVID or complications from COVID than Caucasians. So it's an interesting one. I was sort of thinking about, and I'm like, so it's almost 3.1% higher for ethnic minorities, I think. So, or sorry, 3 times, not percent, higher probability of having problems. So I was looking at that.
An interesting point there. I mean, I caught the news the other day, and it was a study focused on New York and America,
Yeah.
and especially with I think that may be more to do with social status, the rich versus the poor.
Yeah.
And I'm not stereotyping, but obviously kind of the Hispanic ratio to and ethnic minorities, they go out into the slums and there's 5, 6, 7, 8 people living in a house. Whereas you move up to suburban, wherever in America, and you've got the typical stereotypical American dream family living with all their comforts. So, if you've got 7, 8, 9 people living in a house,
Yeah.
straight away the virus can moving around 9 people rather than 3.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, I think there are some sort of like cofactors in terms of chemistry as well with that, I think. And I think if you're of sort of Indian Asian descent, you're 6 times more likely to have blood sugar problems. So you're 6 times more likely to get diabetes in your life. So, which is obviously a huge factor there. And also things like vitamin D. The darker your skin, the harder it is to actually absorb vitamin D from the sun. We've just come to the end of the winter, which means everybody's vitamin D is low anyway. And so if you haven't been supplementing with vitamin D throughout the winter, then you suddenly got a immune system that's not going to be able to work as well as it could. And then obviously with the sun in this country for sure isn't strong enough to be able to top it up with the sun we've had this last week. So yeah, there may be a factor there where we're getting sort of more of a genetic factor of illness. And if people are, again, sort of in the US, if you're linking it to that, it's like the diets are generally quite poor there. I think I can't remember there's a statistic about how much is spent on proper food over in the US, and it's a really appalling ratio of about 5%, and people spend about 70% of their money on food, on fast food. So
I can imagine.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
So it's huge, and I think some like the top foods in the US are deep fried chicken, so breaded chicken, pizza. I think donuts was on there, and it's just awful. It's just all junk food basically, burgers, and you just think, well, yeah, if anyone's going to be hit hard, it's going to be that nation that have subsided on sort of junk food for many years now, and they haven't really had to spare a thought to whether or not they're going to get ill, because the health system's there to catch them potentially, and they can go on some kind of drugs to put off the pain of losing their legs if they've got diabetes or whatnot. So yeah,
I think I might be wrong in saying this, but I think actually the UK is one of the worst for obesity rates in Europe. I could be wrong. I could be plucking that out of thin air, but I know that we are really bad, and our numbers are not getting better. So again, that's something that needs to be addressed, because it wasn't that way 50 years ago.
No,
but all of a sudden we now find ourselves in, I would say, another epidemic, an obesity epidemic, which again doesn't help when we have these things knocking at the door.
Yeah, very, very true. Yeah, it's kind of trying to figure out like where people can go with this, I guess. So what would you sort of recommend to people at the moment in terms of sort of either health or diet or exercise or any sort of supplements or anything that people could potentially act upon?
Well, I've got a few key things which I've recommended to every client. I mean, firstly is routine. That's first and foremost, that's the most important thing. An AM routine and a PM routine. And I think it's nothing new. It's just understanding when to get up in the morning, when to put your alarm on. Yes, we all like a lion, But if you can put your alarm on for 6:30 and get up at 7, you're going to be so much more productive than if you had, say, set your alarm for 9 and got up at 10. You've already wasted half the day. So, I've been always trying to push those morning routines, the stretching, the yoga, getting up, trying to do that fasted cardio when the sun's coming up, because your day is so much more productive. And then the PM routine, simple things like cutting caffeine. I think, is it maybe 10 hours before bedtime? Am I right in saying 10?
Ideally, I think generally, like, caffeine's got a half-life of 12 hours, I think. So
Yeah. So 10 to 12 hours. So
so if you're having it midday, at midnight, you've got still a half a cup of coffee in your system. So depending on how you process caffeine, it can be one way or the other. But usually caffeine's for wakey time rather than I'm bored, I'm going to have a drink and I'll have a coffee.
yeah. Yeah. So PM routine, cutting caffeine, making sure you've done enough in the day to actually feel tired. I think that's a big problem. People are so sedentary during the day that then they can't go to sleep because the body's not tired.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
we've got to move to make sure that our bodies realise we've actually got up and done something, and then they kick off. I think one great one, just as you mentioned, sort of the mornings, is to go and get some light in your eyes. So they say between 20 to 40 minutes of sunlight, or being outside in the sunlight on the retina, is enough to reset your circadian rhythm. So when you do that early in the morning, your body then realizes it's actually daytime and it kicks off your clock. And then obviously by the evening, your clock will be saying time to go to bed, rather than if you hadn't done that, then your body's just saying, well, it's probably midday because there's loads of light, which is your computer or your phone or your TV that you're watching. And and then you're trying to go to bed after that, and you just don't get into good sleep. You don't get into sort of a rejuvenation cycle when you're in bed. So
so I think that's, again, the first and foremost, the most important thing is having that routine, making sure you're not scrolling your social at 1 a.m. because on a normal work day you would have been in bed at 10. So it's trying to get into the rhythm and stay in that rhythm. Even if you sort of you think, well, I'm not doing anything, get up and be productive, make use of that time.
I think a lot of people spent the first couple of weeks of lockdown basically being on holiday or feeling like it. So they were getting up later, they were able to drink most evenings, they could eat crappy foods or whatnot, weren't really exercising. Then 2 weeks came and went, and then it was like, oh, I'm still at home. And then people sort of eased up a bit, and you can see some people going out on runs and whatnot at the moment. But it's kind of, they don't really have the routine there, like you say. And I think if they can then say, okay, I need to get a proper routine in, and like you're recommending there, get up early, go to bed early, get some kind of routine, do some exercise, have certain meal times, maybe make your food, and then you'll be much better off.
I think I've picked up maybe 5 or 6 new clients since we've been in lockdown, which you kind of think, well, what can you do? But every single one of those clients, the first thing they've said to me is, please, can you help me get structure and routine back into my training and my diet, because I've lost the will to live. I don't know what day it is. I don't know what meal it is. I've had 6 bottles of wine and it's not even 10 a.m. Please help me get some structure and routine. And that's one big thing that all of my clients are doing. I've upped check-ins, because I check in with my guys every single week on Saturday. But I've given all of them the option to do 2 check-ins a week, to check in on a Wednesday as well. Just that midweek check-in to make sure that they stay accountable, they adhere to the plan, and they're not just completely dropping away for 6 days and then popping up on Saturday saying, oh, I'm ready to check in now. So routine is the biggest factor. If you have routine, you have structure, and you are able to follow a plan, follow a training plan. If you lack routine, I think things are going to get a lot worse. You are going to be the one gaining 10 to 15 pounds by the time we come out of lockdown. So
good stuff. No, that's sage advice, I'd say. So trying to get that going, get people's environments all sorted out. So it's
I
good.
think with training as well, because there seems to be a bit of a grey area with training. You know, people are used to let's just take a traditional male who trains at the gym 5 times a week, lifting heavy weights. You know, let's just say, for example, benching 100 kilos. How can you go from training 5 times a week, lifting heavy weight, causing that damage to the tissues, to the cells, to training at home? And that was one of the biggest questions I had is, Ross, how do we train at home when we don't have any equipment? So I drafted up.
That's for sure.
Yeah, it is. And it is. But I think the best way to look at it is, I mean, generally in the gym world, we work in mesocycles. So we work in 6, 8, 10 week blocks of training. And if you take this lockdown as a 12-week cycle, you can still make progression. You just treat it as a whole new training stimulus rather than trying to incorporate what you did into your new routine where you have no weights.
Yeah.
So if you treat it as a whole new training mesocycle, week 1, we can start off with a 5-day body routine. And a lot of my clients say, well, how do I progress? Well, if you've got resistance bands, or you've got small weights, or you've got dogs, or you've got kids, I mean, it sounds crazy, but use what you have.
Yeah. Even things like time under tension and an increasing rep range, right? Like for most people, they'll stay sort of in the 10 to 12 rep range when they're lifting weights. Well, they can, go up to 20, 25, 30, sort of use it, like you say, as a time to rejuvenate, like get out those little kinks in your shoulder or the weaknesses you might have here or there, work on those. And then when you go back to the gym, it's going to be game time.
And that's one big thing I focused on. You know, my clients were following the home routine. They get to week 3 and they're like, well, I can't progress because I've done 4 sets of 20 press ups. I say, okay, well, let's add time under tension. So when you get to the bottom of that press up, I want you to hold it for 5 seconds and then drive up.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And all of a sudden the difference, I can only do 10.
Yeah.
So straight away, we've then progressed. How do we then progress that into week 5? Well, we're going to hold it for 5 seconds. We're going to do 3 pulses at the bottom, and then we're going to drive up. Oh my God, it's getting even harder.
Yeah.
And, if you look at it in that respect, you are able to then progress every single week, whether it's load, whether you do have access to resistance bands, whether it's reps, whether it's volume, but you are still able to progress. And by the time we finish lockdown, you're then going to go into the brand new mesocycle, so a brand new training block, and you'll be more than ready to get straight back into it.
Yeah.
10 steps ahead rather than 10 steps behind. So I think that's especially important when it comes to training, is to look at it as if you've only got access to a bench and 2 5-kilogram plates, use that to your advantage, because 90% of people don't even have that.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think gyms as well are going to be probably the last place to let loose again, because obviously you've got hundreds of people using the same piece of equipment every single day, especially in some of the bigger gyms. And for yourself, who has your own studio, it's like, actually that's probably going to be the best place to go train, because then there's only a certain amount of people coming through. You're obviously going to be responsible and keep things sanitized throughout. So it'll be really much easier way to sort of manage the process, rather than say, right, hundreds of people in a gym at once and all using the same equipment all the time. So which is a great way to spread a virus.
Yeah. I will be, I've had a little think, because I will be opening up most probably into next week, taking on 1 or 2 clients. Now we've kind of passed that peak. I know that most of my clients have been in lockdown, so I'm ready to open up. But I think one of the other things I want to just jump on here and say is use virtual classes, because I've been running virtual classes virtually since lockdown started, maybe 4 or 5 classes a week. and they've been great. Like my clients have all jumped on.
Mm.
We've smashed it out. We've done upper body, lower body, total body conditioning. Everything that I've raised or everything that I've made from the classes, I'm donating to the NHS. So I'm not in it for the profit.
Wow.
I'm solely doing it to help those guys who are struggling with routine and they just want to get up at 7 and do a morning class like they used to.
Yeah.
They can do that, and it starts off the day, or if they want to finish on a 6 p.m. conditioning class, again, they've got the option. But there are hundreds, I know hundreds of trainers offering virtual classes for free. So there really is no excuse.
Yeah, I mean, obviously YouTube's a big thing at the moment, isn't it? So it's like it's not tailored, but at least it'll get you moving. So take your pick, whatever you enjoy, and then
Absolutely.
yeah, and you'll be able to get something out of it at least. And then when the lockdown releases, you can then sort of personalize yourself a bit more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Well, this was fun, man. Thanks for coming. First off, where can people find you? So, do you have any sort of information if people want to join your classes or whatnot?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. All of my social media handles is just Ross Potter PT.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm on all the socials, or you can just jump on the business page, which is RP Coaching _. But yeah, jump on. Feel free to get involved with any classes. Just drop me a message via the socials, and I can set you up, get you ready for coaching, virtual classes, whatever it is you need. But yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been great to catch up, and I'm sure that there will be many more to come.
Yeah, no, we'll definitely do this again. We'll try and get some more people on, get that roundtable thing going. So it's important to try and get the message out to people, but also, you know, as many experts as we can in one room always helps, I think. So we'll keep that going. But thanks everyone for listening. If you made it this far, I hope that's opened up a few avenues of your thoughts and motivated you to try and do a little bit more in terms of your health to really help yourselves, but ultimately to help everyone around you as well. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you very soon on the next one. So until then, take care.